I don't know if you've ever received a thank you note, but it's really cool when something like that comes in the mail. You did a kind thing, you didn't do it for the thanks, but when someone follows up and says thank you, it really touches your heart. Well, that's what Paul did with the church at Philippi. They were really generous, and they all got together and they had an offering because they heard that Paul was in need while he was in prison in Rome, and they sent the gift to him, and he was blown away. So we have the book of Philippians, which is Paul's thank you note to that church. But he put something else in that book which is quite interesting. He says this: I really love you guys, and what I would love to do is send my friend, my boy, Timothy to you. And he writes a little bit about Timothy. It's almost like saying you really need to trust this guy because he's one of the best. Actually, Paul said this in chapter 2. He is exceptional. There is no one else like him. And this was from a young guy. He was just a young guy. Paul said there's no one else like him. He's remarkable. But he says something else about him. He says he has proved himself, and this is what he talked about, in the area of serving with me like a son with his father in absolutely propelling and sharing the gospel. And I love that little line about Timothy. He has proved himself. And what did he prove himself at? He proved himself as being reliable. If you go to buy a car today, it goes through all of the pressure tests. It's taken out multiple times. It's put into crashes to see if it is reliable. And Timothy had been through the test of time, the test of mission, and the test of relationship, and he proved himself reliable. And maybe you're watching me today and you're thinking, I'm never going to be a Paul, I'm never going to be a Timothy, I'm never going to be a great missionary. The truth is you can be simply by proving yourself reliable. And one of the greatest areas of proving reliability in our lives is in relationships. I want to speak to every single person who is married and for those who would like to be married. God wants us to be reliable in the most important areas of our lives. Not just our jobs, not just in relationships with our neighbors, maybe some other teams or sports that we're on, but in the most important relationships. And I would say that is in our marriage. My father is one of my absolute heroes. I've known him, quite literally, all of my life. And sadly, just over 2 years ago, my mom passed away. But previous to that, she hadn't been well. And I watched my father for almost 2 years love on her, take care of her, and quite literally be there for her beck and every single need. Yeah, he had other assistants, but he was her primary care. And I still remember on the day of my mum's funeral looking at my dad, and I was overwhelmed by the sense of appreciation, love that he had, and devotion towards my mum right up to the end. You see, it's one thing to be a young guy at the front of a church on your wedding day. And I remember, I wasn't there for my mom and dad's wedding, but I've seen the pictures so many times. And my dad looks so well. He's got a 3-button suit on. He's got the Chelsea boots on. I mean, he was a Marine at the time. He looked so absolutely cool. And it's one thing to stand at the front of a church as a young guy and go, I do. My mom looked beautiful. Of course he was saying, I do. But it's another thing years later, 58 years later, to stand at someone's grave and to be able to say, I did. You see, my dad proved himself reliable. I want to say to everybody married today, there will be times in your life when your marriage is like, wow, and there's other times it plateaus a little bit, and there's other times when it begins to, whoa, I don't like the feeling of this. But I'm going to encourage everybody, through the good times and through the tough times, let's prove ourselves reliable, just like young Timothy. Let's do it in the 21st century in the most important areas of our lives, and let's stand the test of time.